orchard got started back in 1928 when my grandfather set the first apple trees. It was kind of a new adventure for him in some ways, I know. He was selling apple trees at the time from Stark Brother Nurseries, and so in doing that, developed an interest in orchards and so forth, and then decided to go ahead and put out a block of apples here in our county, in Hancock County. The neighbors, on the other hand, didn't think this was quite a great adventure. He had at least one neighbor come up and thought he was doing the craziest thing he could ever do in setting out that many trees, which was about 20 acres at the time, which is quite a lot of apple trees. And so it was a new venture for him, a new venture for our county in a lot of ways. Last year was our 80th year in business, which was kind of exciting to celebrate that time period. And in doing so, we did a lot of reminiscing and going back to records. And fortunately, our grandparents' house is right here on the premises, and in their attic, they had saved a lot of materials from way back when, and one of those included the actual receipt for buying the first apple trees for the farm here. A lot of records going back to where they sold their apples and what the price was, and back in those days it was extremely low compared to today. Quantity volumes was a lot larger in a lot of ways. They grew a lot more apple volume-wise in some ways than what we do today, but most of that was going to wholesale outlets, to institutions being schools, that kind of thing, versus today we're mostly retail, probably 90% retail, versus the opposite maybe back in those days.
We do have a patented variety of apple that was originated here in this orchard. Apple trees are reproduced asexually. They have to be done by grafting in order to get the same exact tree every time you get a new tree. They can't be grown from seed because every tree will be different. Our father was picking out fair apples back in the 60s and noticed that one tree of Stamen winesap had a lot better color and seemed to color earlier. In other words, got its red color earlier, and that's a late apple, and typically doesn't have real great color anyway. He watched that a couple of years, and then he sent some sample apples to Stark Brothers Nurseries over in Missouri. They came back and wanted some budwood so that they could bud some trees or graft some trees to try it out. We didn't hear anything from for probably 6-8 years until they had seen it produced there, and they were interested in fact, wanted to patent the variety. Where that particular variety originates is the only one that can patent it. So the patent is in my grandfather's name, and it's over on the wall over in the market. But Stark Brothers then bought the rights to it to propagate it. I would assume probably all over the world at this point there's trees that came from that original tree here on this farm.
In the 70s, it was kind of the U-pick era, in which people really were excited about coming out to the farm picking their own produce. So that lasted probably about 10 years. Then we emphasized doing tourism more so. My father did a lot with school tours, but also the state fair. I mean, he was kind of the one that really pushed the state fair, that we had to go every year, and it was very important to show and be a part of that. And so we continued that even after his passing, and our kids have taken a part into that and showing and so forth, not just in the open class, but in 4-H. They've been very active in 4-H work. So that's been real neat.
Now my grandfather and my mom, they had actually shown apples many years before that. Dad spent 2 weeks basically just getting ready for the state fair and picking apples and getting them all put together, and we all helped. You got to get them all sized, and so they all look just alike, and they got to have the right color and so on. So it's a time-intensive project just to get it all put together.
I would go up, climb up clear to the top of the tree and find the nicest apples as far as the most color, because that's where they'd be, is up in the top of the trees, and throw those down one at a time to my mom, and then she would put them into crates, wrap them with newspaper to protect them, and then come back up here to the farm, and then we go over to the market and on the grading table and unsort all those, unpack them, clean them, and then go through the process of actually putting them into plates or selecting the plates and the trays and the bushels and so forth.
You have to really look close, because there can be some little defects that the average person would never pick up on. The thing that I think is important for fruit that a lot of times you don't get in the supermarket is that we can grow the fruit up, get more maturity on it. An apple is accumulating starch, really, for the most part, all through the summer. When it gets close to time when they're going to start ripening, then the apple starts converting that starch to sugar. And that's why an apple gets sweeter the closer it is to harvest, typically. The best way to tell if an apple is ready to pick is just taste it. And that usually is just as good as all the scientific things you can do with it. You can pick them a month before they're ready. And they will ripen over time, but they never get quite the quality because they never get as much sugar in them as what they would have had they stayed on the tree longer and achieved the real maximum maturity. And they can get too ripe. So you don't want to leave them on too long, because then they start, once they get all that starch converted to sugar, then they start to soften and they lose their quality from that standpoint. They may have good taste, but the eating quality isn't there anymore that most people are looking for.
When you enter for the state fair in pomology, there's certain varieties that are listed that you can show those certain varieties. But over the years, that's changed. Back years ago, like Stamen Wine Sap was one that was an entry of its own. Now, those aren't even listed. So some of the newer varieties like Honeycrisp has been added, Gala, a lot of these newer varieties have been added that make it more up to date as far as what we're showing and more in line with what the customer is used to seeing and that kind of thing. The state fair for us is very important, not just from the standpoint that we've been showing a long time, but it does add to an outlet for advertising for us. We get our name out when we go to the fair. Most of our tourism is in September, October with school tours and that kind of thing. And so by allowing people to know that we're there and that we do have tours, that generates some interest in coming out to our farm. And I think it's neat that our whole family has an opportunity to participate in that. From time to time, it is a challenge to get everybody focused to do this, but it is important. I think it kind of brings us together and gives us something to look forward to as far as the fair and being a part of the fair. We have 7 children in our family. Our oldest daughter, Ruth Ann, has come back to the business and works very heavily in the market area and does a great job. Has a lot of gifts and working with computers, upgrading our market, making it more presentable.
She does all the work as far as the web page and all that kind of stuff.
Can kind of see things that could be improved, and just having another eye from another perspective of what the upcoming world is going to be like or what their interests are and all that is very, very important. We have diversified in a lot of areas. We've got the flowers, the greenhouse, vegetable crops in the summer, and then mainly apples in the fall, but a lot of that deals with tourism.
It's tough to make it in the U-pick business other than apples and pumpkins, and that's the 2 main crops today that we sell U-pick. But I think the thing that's really interesting there in talking about tourism, it's not uncommon at all that on a Saturday you'll see a whole family come out, father and mom and 2 or 3 kids or whatever. And we give them all a wagon like we got in here to go out and pick apples or pumpkins, either one. When we used to do this back 15 years ago, why people come in, they'd have 2 or 3 half bushels, or even more than that. Well, today, you can send that family out there with their wagon and they'll have a basket or 2 to put apples in, and they'll come back and they got 5 pounds of apples. They've been out there for 3 hours. They've just been looking at trees, and showing the kids where apples grow, and it's an experience. It's been a real nice thing that Dad started there, and we've kept going.